Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Wednesday Wise webinar, sponsored by Location3. We have a great 60 minutes lined up for you. Just a reminder that this will be recorded and on our community site, community.franchise.org, by the end of today. All right, so today's topic is how to drive revenue with the right franchise media mix. And here to present are Alex Porter, CEO with Location3, Shalini Reddy, Director of Local Strategy with Location3, Boyd Hathaway, Director of Franchise Performance Location3, and then Bo Lowry, Director of Marketing at Wild Birds Unlimited. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and thank you especially to Location3 for sponsoring today's webinar. If you do have any questions for our speakers, please make sure you put them in the questions box and they'll address them at the end of today's session. All right, I'm going to kick it over to Alex to get us started. Tell us a little bit more about Location3 and get us into the content. Alex?
Great, thank you so much and welcome everyone. Exciting to have a great panel for you today. Very appropriate topic for right now. The 2021 Franchise Economic Report that was released by the IFA in Q1 really show that there's a lot of potential for strong growth as we emerge from this pandemic. As the economy hopefully shifts more into growth mode, consumers are increasing their spending, and it's really imperative for all of us in the franchise world to optimize our local media mix to drive revenue. Because in the marketing world, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to attract new customers and drive new revenue. Quick about us for Location3. We are a digital marketing agency that is very focused in the franchise space. Our mission is to provide an enterprise level strategy and bring that to life on the local level. We work with each individual franchisee to provide that local marketing mix and drive that revenue. So today we're going to hit on a number of different topics. What is that right local media mix? How do you need to supplement your national advertising with local? What difference is there between an urban market and a rural market? What difference is there between a new store and an existing location? How do you measure it all? How do you optimize it all? Lots of topics, lots of complicated topics. We're going to talk for about 40 minutes with the panel, and then we're going to go into some Q&A. So keep the questions coming throughout. We'll have those in the chat, and we'll talk about those for about 15 minutes at the end. I'm very excited for our panelists today. A little bit about me, Alex Porter. I've been with Location3 for over 15 years. I am a certified franchise executive, very proud of that fact, and very active in the franchise community. We are going to ask each one of these panelists what their favorite bird is as their fun fact about them, in recognition of our great panelists from Wild Birds Unlimited. I am a Baltimore native, so my favorite birds are my sports team, the Baltimore Oriole, which I do sometimes see out in Colorado, and the Raven, which I often see out in Colorado. So those are my two birds. And Bo, why don't we kick it over to you next for a quick intro?
Sure, thanks, Alex. Bo Lowry, and I'm Director of Marketing for Wild Birds Unlimited. I've been with the company coming up on 23 years. And we have about 355 retail locations across the US and Canada, really focused on selling bird feeders, bird seed, all the fun things that you need to enjoy wild birds in your backyard. I have a couple of favorite birds. My longtime favorite bird has always been, oddly enough, a non-feeder and a flightless bird, and that's the penguin. But as far as feeder birds are concerned, the eastern bluebird has become my favorite this past year, as I've been able to work from home and watch my birds a lot more often, like many of our customers have been able to do. And we've been very fortunate to have bluebirds, and I've got my first nest full of little eggs, so I'm waiting for those to hatch. Yeah,
that's awesome. Before we move on to our next panel, a couple additional questions about Wild Birds Unlimited. One, just a quick sense, how have you guys fared over the last 12 months? I know for me personally, I did not have a bird feeder, and now I do. So I'm wondering if you've seen some growth in that area.
Yes, tremendous growth. I would say how we're doing is we're exhausted. We've been the recipients of wonderful new customer growth, a lot of additional engagement among our existing customer base. You know, it just, I think as people obviously were sheltering at home and working remote, and I think a lot of people just kind of rediscovered the fact that they have a backyard, and
Right.
there's something kind of cool about that. So yeah, we've been very fortunate in that regard.
That's amazing. Just in full transparency, we do work together in from a marketing standpoint. So just wanted to put that out there. Shalini, you're up.
Hello, everybody. I'm Shalini Reddy. I'm the Director of Local Strategy here at Location3. I've been with Location3 for 3 years, but I've been a digital marketer for over 10 years. I specialize in paid search. I enjoy crafting digital marketing campaigns to get more customers and generate more revenue for all my clients. And my new hobby, the pandemic hobby, is bird watching. And I think my two favorite ones would be owls and hummingbirds.
Excellent. Boyd.
Hi, everyone. Boyd Hathaway. I'm the Director of Franchise Performance at Location3. I've been here for almost 7 years now, and today I really oversee our local marketing advisor team who speaks directly to the franchisees and helps with education on digital marketing tactics and strategies, and also work closely with the advertising operations team who build and manage and optimize the campaigns. And I would say, you know, I live in Tennessee. I live in Franklin, Tennessee, and we have a lot of cardinals everywhere, and they're beautiful birds, so I love seeing them. We also have a bird feeder this year that we didn't have last year, so we are contributing to the trend, I should say.
Great. So three new Wild Birds Unlimited customers on the panel here. So
Awesome. Thank you.
all right. Well, thanks everybody. We're going to go through these topics in general, and really what we want to start off with is what do we need to do to get started? What kind of foundationally needs to exist before we can really talk about that media mix? What do the goals look like at that location level? And then a couple different scenarios, one for an existing location that's looking to grow. And the next scenario is it a brand new location, and maybe some subtle differences that, or not so subtle differences that might exist based on the geography of the location. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how do you test into new channels, and then wrap it up with how do you measure all this? How do you understand if everything's working? Like I said, it's a pretty complicated process and all kinds of different scenarios for us to talk through. So we're going to kick it off with what needs to be in place, and we're going to keep this pretty free form. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to start off with two things. One, I do want to recognize the fact that Location3, we are a digital marketing agency, so we definitely tend to think about marketing from a digital perspective. So we're going to have Bo ground us in kind of all the other areas of marketing that we need to consider as well. But to start off, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of the tech side and the data side. And so, Shalini, I'm wondering if you could kick us off for a brand new engagement, a brand new marketing initiative. What do we need to make sure that we have in place that we can actually track and measure and understand this marketing campaign that we're looking to do?
Yeah, that's a great topic to start, Alex. So from a data and technology perspective, when we're starting off, I think one of the basic foundations is to have that landing page that we want to send users to. So making sure that the website is in place, the landing pages are built out, and then from a tracking perspective, is Google Analytics set up correctly? Do we have the GTMs set up? And if we're going, social marketing route, Facebook is a great option. Is the Facebook pixel set up correctly? And then coming from a very local perspective, GMB would be a big one. So making sure that Google My Business is set up correctly, so we're able to really use that local strategy to advertise for our client.
Gotcha. And so for the Google My Business connection, that's imperative in order to pull over things like phone numbers and location extensions and things like that. That connection really needs to be in place.
Correct.
Great. Okay. All right. So we've got a checklist of here's some of the basics. The next thing on the list really is around your targeting and how do you look at that both from an audience and a geography. Boyd, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we work with a lot of franchise brands, and everyone has a different strategy when it comes to individual location targeting, compliance, and protected areas. So we kind of see it all over, but we do like to see when there is a strategy and a protected area for a particular location. If you're running ads for hundreds or thousands of locations, then you want to have those targeting areas built out and segmented for each of the locations, right? And so if that's not in place, there are certainly solutions where we'll work with, radii or a series of zip codes that make up a polygon, and be very careful about building out that targeting, that geo targeting, because we want it to be separate from the other locations. We don't really want to encourage the overlap from location to location. It can happen and work in a few scenarios, but for the most part, a single location should have an area that is protected and that they're targeting by themselves. So that's really important for these campaigns. When you look at the different types of markets, you have highly populated areas, you have suburban markets and rural areas, and it's all about the audience size, right? So how many people are in that area, and then how many people are potentially interested in your products or services. And that's going to vary from market to market and state to state and region to region. So collecting data over time can help inform, do we need to expand the targeting area for a single location, or maybe it's too large and we need to kind of bring it back in and make it smaller. Many times just expanding or reducing the area can really affect the volume of leads that you're getting and the volume of results that you're getting as well. So that's certainly a big lever too.
Makes sense. So Bill, how about kind of the non-digital pieces of the puzzle that need to be in place? And also if you could kind of touch a little bit on kind of the goal setting process. So if we're doing marketing at that local level, how do you think about goals for that marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. As we rolled out kind of this broader digital effort, one of the things for our franchisees to understand was how does that work with traditional channels, right? So people were already doing, monthly postcards, so direct mail. We had certainly newspaper advertising in some markets, or TV, radio, things like that. And I think that those foundational pieces, whatever in the traditional channels, still is viable in a given market. We made really sure to be clear that don't just stop just because digital exists now. You don't walk away from those things that are still working, but you do absolutely evaluate how are they working, and can this new digital spend either enhance those traditional channels, or in some cases maybe do a better job or replace, to the point where you can actually replace a channel. So one of the things we work with our franchisees on is understanding that mix, and as Boyd mentioned, very, very different market to market. There are certainly some markets where a franchisee can absolutely afford to do cable TV and they can really make a big splash. And that's fantastic. And then we have others who are in more of a major metro, and there is no way that their local budget can support that sort of thing. So that's really where looking at what are the goals for both the retention, customer retention mix, along with new customer acquisition, and figuring out, well, what's going to be the most optimal mix of that.
Right.
And that's something that we've just had to learn over time, market by market.
Yeah, and it's staying on the topic of goals for a second. So, there is a lot of different KPIs that could be included and should be included in these local marketing programs. But how do you kind of speak to that to the individual location to help them understand kind of how the different tactics support some of these different goals? Is that part of that educational process?
Yeah, very definitely. I think when we very first started as well, one of the things we had to kind of overcome is, well, what's the benchmark? Our franchisees are very data driven, of course, and they wanted to know, well, what's good? What should I be shooting for? How do I compare to my peers? How do I compare to other Wild Birds Unlimited stores in similar markets? And one of the things was just to understand, well, gosh, there really aren't benchmarks to begin with. It's kind of figuring out how to optimize for yourself, for your market and your scenario. And that took a little bit of even for us to understand and then turn around and teach the franchisees. We really think about it from that kind of funnel journey, the traditional funnel journey, and how you apply that to digital marketing. And we emphasize go after that paid search first, right? That's high intent. That's people in your local market searching for your keywords. They're ready to buy. They're ready to talk to you. Do that first, optimize that first, and then move into some of the other channels along the way, like paid social and display. The social is very appealing a lot of times, especially in our industry. I mean, we have beautiful birds to share, and so the images that we have to put out on social are compelling, and it's easy to think, well, that's going to do a good job for me. But really understanding who those audiences are that you're targeting with each one of those pieces, I think was a big educational part that we've moved through as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the educational piece because the funnel is a term that I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with because so many of these tactics can fit in many different areas of the funnel, depending really on the mindset of that customer. And it's one of the biggest challenges I think for Boyd and his team is to really that educational piece. So the question of is this good comes up a lot, right? So they say, okay, I did an awareness campaign on Facebook with video, and you're telling me I got this many people to watch the video. Is that good? Do I care? What does that mean for me at the end of the day? So education, I think, is such a huge, important piece of what we do. But you touched on, where do you start first? And Shalini, I want to kick it over to you. So again, the caveat that we are a digital agency, so if you're looking at this and saying where is the traditional budget, we'll definitely touch on that. But from a digital perspective, Shalini, can you tell a little bit about why do we say local paid first? Why do we feel that that's the best place to go?
Yep, and I'm gonna quote Bo from a little earlier where she said people are searching for your keywords. So paid search is very intent based, whether a person or a user is searching for the brand that they're familiar with or the service or product that they're looking for. It is getting that user, capturing that intent in that time, and presenting the ad that satisfies that search that they're performing at that moment. So that's where paid search absolutely fits in and should always, in my opinion, be maximized first before going into other tactics. Having said that, though, this absolutely ties in with the goals. If it's an awareness tactics, there is no brand presence or their brand presence is limited and we want to create a need, then paid search may not be the first route to take. We may think about social or display efforts, whether it's even more higher funnel if we're doing a TV buy or something, just to create that need before we can then hone in on the search intent using paid search.
And those areas that you mentioned, the local paid social and local display, there is an opportunity to kind of leverage existing customer data so that you're not casting a very wide net. You are starting with some information up front that helps you hone in on that targeting.
Correct. And the technology allows us to create similar to audiences as well. So You feed them the customer list, and then we're able to create a lookalike audience, which we can also leverage to expand that audience, being still targeted given the traits of the user base.
Boyd, with your team, question for you. How do you help the franchisee understand the difference between that, somebody searched for a bird feeder, they clicked on it, they bought it. We have that all tracked out versus a Facebook where maybe they saw the image, they clicked on it, maybe they didn't buy it, but we still feel that's valuable. How do you explain kind of the value of that more awareness approach?
Yeah, you can really see it in the data in many cases where you could run a $500 budget on social and run a $500 budget on search, and you may get 30, 40,000 impressions on the social side and maybe 10,000 or 5,000 on the search side. So it's social and display drive tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of impressions. So there's a lot of people seeing your ad there. And, based on the reporting that's available, a lot of that on social and display is if they click on the ad, if they engage with the ad, and then come back at a later time and convert on the site, then it's going to be attributed to that first touch of social or display. So the attribution modeling is a conversation that it's tricky to have, at the local level with franchisees, but it's very important because you hear all different types of numbers out there across different industries. 7 to 15 times a consumer sees your brand or interacts with your brand before they actually make a purchase. So it's multiple times that they have to kind of interact with your brand online or in the traditional world, and including all of those different tactics helps build that audience and ultimately build the audience at the smallest level where they're taking an action, where they're searching on Google and giving you a call or filling out a form.
Right. Yeah, we're gonna touch on that local attribution conundrum here in a minute. But definitely it's an educational process to really keep people understanding these different tactics have different goals, like we talked about in the previous slide. So that was a scenario of you have an existing location, you want to do some digital marketing. Where do you go? The advice is to maximize your search first. Make sure that keyword list is very germane to your product or service and have a strong impression share. We can track that all the way through and really understand that ROI. Now we're looking at a location that's maybe it's brand new, maybe it's even hasn't been opened yet. Or maybe it's in a market where there's just not awareness around the brand, or there's a lot of competitors. So we want to talk a little bit about what additional channels can we do to raise that awareness. And Bo, I want to start with you because you mentioned earlier direct mail, newspaper, TV, radio. How do you fit all of that into the marketing program? How do you kind of look at all the channels that are available and decide, or help your franchisees decide where to go?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely evolved over time. I think the introduction of having paid social, especially in the mix for us, has been a big change. When we talk about a grand opening campaign for a new location, that's really where we start. We will start pre-open before the stores even open with paid social in the market, looking at those lookalike audiences and trying just to get that awareness out there. We do still, of course, do direct mail and print. It does vary by location, by market. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there are some places where, yeah, we can afford to do cable. We can do a nice flight of ads for that, and we would drum up a lot of awareness with that sort of thing. Newspaper does still play a big role in most markets these days, but particularly, like I said earlier, in those major metros where some of those buys are quite expensive and might be outside the reach of a local franchisee just getting started, that's really where the power of the digital piece comes into play. Definitely for us, we've had a lot of success too with YouTube videos as for driving awareness for us.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to our initial discussion around what data do you need to have to get started. So if you have a location, you know information obviously about their population around, their competition around, and taking those factors in, I would imagine helps dictate which channels that you all recommend right off the bat.
Definitely, and we have a member of our marketing team who works very closely with the new franchisee in just looking at what are the media outlets in a given market, and just simply beat the bushes and get rate cards and start, what's it going to cost in this newspaper versus that one. Is there some local magazine or publication that's very popular? A lot of times little niche things or little specialty magazines or publications can be a good place to look as well for us. And just figuring out, what makes sense there. We test it, and that may become part of their long-term media mix. And sometimes we learn this is really not the right place.
Sure. Shawnee, can you talk a little bit about the programmatic display and YouTube, and really you can buy that YouTube programmatic, so we can kind of let's lump all programmatic into one bucket. What are some tips or tricks that at a local level can you target that just as well as these other channels? And is there anything around kind of creative to keep in mind when you're looking at that for a part of your marketing mix?
Yes, absolutely. I think these tactics are great for overall awareness, as well as definitely can be targeted to be more local with creative. And knowing your audience is the key, knowing what segments to go after, and to just get the most bang for the buck using these programmatic buys. I do want to add that along with all these awareness tactics, paid search is not off the table. Having a more integrated approach, especially with branded terms, to see how all this awareness tactics is funneling into the actual awareness in the market, can be measured with these branded campaigns. And not to say non-brand is not good at this stage. There's already probably a need for the product or service, and let's get ahead of the competition's ads with the paid ads from this brand, so that even when people are searching, and I'm going to use bird feeders as an example, if someone is searching for bird feeder and not really the brand name, let's not just let the competition take those searches, let's show our brand and get those users to buy.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned brand search there. So just in terms of that paid search marketing mix, is it the recommendation to buy those brand terms at the local level versus at the national level? If you can just give a quick commentary on managing brand searches local versus national.
Yes, so again, this is intent based. So things like a brand search plus a near me term, or a brand search with the geo term. And the geo is also varied. It can be a state, it can be a neighborhood, it can be city with the state name. There's whole a range of ways people search. Near me is very mobile friendly. People searching on their phones are more likely to just say near me, or the phone automatically sends out ads based on the location. So yeah, it's very local focused again with these
Gotcha.
keywords.
Makes sense. Wanted to talk, shift gears a little bit and talk about all the additional channels that are available to us these days with the growth in connected TV, programmatic radio, the growth in podcast even over the last year with more audio targeting. Bo, I'm curious of your thoughts on this. So how does kind of the national versus the local play out to this? You mentioned a little bit about, maybe this local market could afford it or not afford it. How do you view some of these buys that can be managed in a central location but delivered locally. How are you thinking about that right now from a connected TV standpoint?
Yeah, it's definitely on our radar and definitely something that we're starting to experiment with in some of the local buys that we're helping franchisees with. We've not done a lot of it yet, but we are interested just to see if it is something that could help us crack some of those markets that I mentioned are just too expensive, or even where maybe it's a group buy of a group of franchisees in a given market. Because we definitely have some areas where that, I mean, honestly, did the Denver market where you guys are located is one where it's just really expensive. And so, what can we do? We've started doing that with some of the local buys that we've done lately. Podcasting, I think, is another great thing. We started our own podcast during the pandemic. Actually, we've done a great job, I think, with it. Our nature education team mans that, and has turned out to be a really wonderful channel for us for brand awareness and getting that educational information out there. We've not dabbled in, paid ad placement within podcasts either. But I think the thing right now, the big overarching message is there's so many new places to look where you could put an ad, that, you can't just discount things. You just have to try. You have to test a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a great, we always highly recommend to just have some money, some budget set aside for the try some stuff. Budget is what we like to call it, because every month there seems to be a new opportunity to test them out. Boyd, I'm curious, in your team's interaction with the franchisees, are they asking about video? Are they asking about YouTube? Are they asking about YouTube TV? I just switched to YouTube TV a few months ago. I love it. One of the interesting things I find about YouTube TV is they don't have a lot of commercials. They'll literally have an air spot where it'll be like, we'll be back in 15 seconds because nobody's bought that commercial spot, I guess. I don't know enough about it, but are franchisees interested in that? Are they talking about it?
Yeah, they're just now starting to ask, how can I buy on YouTube or YouTube TV? And I think we're getting to a place where they have the foundational efforts, taken care of in terms of they're running, at a pretty good level for Google paid search already, and
Right.
they're invested already on Facebook and maybe a little bit of display ads as well. And they're trying to expand their reach a little bit more and have some of that brand consistency across additional platforms. So that's the next question that we're just now starting to get from franchisees is how can I purchase, a YouTube ad or
Right.
YouTube TV? And it's interesting because we kind of have to say, okay, what are your goals, right? What are your goals
right.
to drive new customers? And they say, yeah, well, we've got that covered on Google paid search and Facebook and display. We want to generate a little bit more awareness, right?
Right.
And that's kind of the aha moment for them. And we say, well, that's great. Let's figure out a way to run this locally.
And Shalini, are there barriers to entry if we wanted to, assuming we had creative that had maybe a little local tagline at the end of the YouTube ad, can you purchase that kind of through the same system through Google AdWords? Just have YouTube as a
Yes.
as a channel?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That's what.
Yep.
So the big question then becomes, okay, now we've got all this stuff happening. We've got direct mail, newspaper, radio. We're sponsoring the softball league. We're doing Google paid. We're doing Instagram videos. We're doing YouTube ads. How do you make sense of it all? And we only have 5 minutes left before Q&A. So this is probably the hardest tactic. I'm going to start with Bo. How do you attempt to have the franchisee understand all the various things that are going on, maybe even upfront or ongoing?
Yeah, that has long been a challenge, right? And then this is just another little wrinkle in there. We do have our franchisees submit a monthly marketing report that shows us, and helps them see as well, here are all the different layers. We tend to talk to them in terms of it's not all about one channel or it's not about one layer. It's about the mix of them all. It's kind of that like a recipe, right? And how the sum of the parts are greater, you know, altogether. And I think one of the things that's been really helpful with the introduction of digital into the mix is that you can see just very specifically those, you know, oh, it created this ad drove this many clicks are fine, that's great, but more importantly, people who actually store visits. I mean, where do you get that metric anywhere else, right? We
Right.
can see they actually they saw my ad, they clicked my ad, they came to the store, driving directions, phone calls, and then typically my question to them is, okay, look at that, you know, return on ad spend, and
Mhm.
is there someplace else in a different channel that could have driven, even if it's 10, 15, it's 100, you know, store visits, do you have someplace else that would do a better job of that? If the answer is no, then keep going on digital. And if the answer is yes, then let's lean into that channel.
Yeah.
It really just thinking in terms of that return on ad spend.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a little bit of just that the gut feeling too that happens when you try out a new channel and you see, you know, the data can tell you one thing, but people actually coming in, seeing that revenue go up is oftentimes the easiest way to figure it out.
Yeah.
Shalini, tell us a little bit about how from this scary third bullet point of local attribution, is that I'm going to say not so much from a franchisee education standpoint. I'm going to have Boyd talk about that, but on your end, when you're optimizing programs at that local level, how do you think about how a GDA campaign might be influencing a brand search, and really where do you get that data and measurement from?
So analytics is a great source to see that, where we're able to see what the first touch point is and then the subsequent touch points. And most often they're not, if it's last click based model, then paid search usually gets the conversion. But
Right.
but you have to consider the funnel, the entire funnel that drove that final result. And many times it's a social interaction or a GDA interaction that actually drove that final sale.
Right. So just as a kind of a pro tip, in your Google Analytics account, you'll have a drop down for attribution modeling, and you could go in there and you can import a model from somewhere else. You could look at linear, time-based, first touch, last touch, weighted. And what that will do is, assuming you've set everything up properly and you have everything tagged, you can play around with, you know, did a GDA have actually had the first touch but 0 conversions, but they led to a brand conversion. You can even look at that, and correct me if I'm wrong, within paid search, where you can see, okay, these non-branded terms, you know, maybe had a really high cost per order, but they led to a brand search that converted later on. So it's definitely a balancing act when looking at that data and making the optimizations in those
Yep.
campaigns.
And more, we are moving to an industry where we're bidding also based on a data-driven attribution model, where we're not just saying, hey, let's credit a keyword that actually generated the sale or lead, but give credit to all the touch points in the process. So each one has a fair share of credit, and, you know, building on that for future searches as well.
Absolutely. There is so much data that goes into, you know, optimizing and managing a $500 local budget. It's pretty incredible. Obviously, with the goal to drive the most revenue, but at the most efficient rate. Boyd, I'm gonna end it with you. So how do you take all of that and explain it to a franchisee? So we're obviously not telling them about data-driven attribution modeling.
Right.
I would assume. But how do you help the franchisee understand how it all works together?
Yeah, so typically at the local level, there's not a ton of data to work with for a single location. You know, you have a somewhat limited budget as a franchisee, and you're only, you know, covered across maybe a couple different digital tactics. But what we can do is we can look across the entire system and get some answers in terms of which services, which tactics are contributing to that customer journey. And so when we look at it across an entire system, we can then have that conversation at the local level and say, if you, turn on a display campaign, then your, brand awareness or your brand search and traffic and leads are going to increase, right? Or your non-brand are going to increase by X amount. So
Right.
that's typically the way we look at it across the entire system, and then we can have that localized conversation.
Sure. Yeah, it's really about education at that point, right? Just helping them understand that the different tactics have different goals, and kind of making them feel good about it. So if Google Display doesn't show a positive ROI from direct conversions, but it shows great reach and impressions and engagement, then it's just a matter kind of shifting that conversation, I guess, in terms of some of those things. So we're gonna jump into Q&A, but before we do, just a quick spin around. Give me something that's on the horizon that 12 months from now we're going to be talking about it as either something we're trying out or something that's working out really well. I'll go first. I think this is kind of a crystal ball. I think that within the next year or so, we're going to be able to buy linear TV with the digital programmatic buying capabilities. I know there's more and more folks that are coming online with that, but that's my prediction is a year from now, inside of our platform, we'll probably have linear TV as an option. We'll go to Bo.
Gosh, you didn't cue me up for this, Alex.
I wanted to get you right on the spot.
Exactly. No, this may not necessarily be in advertising arena, but I think it certainly supports those efforts. And really personalization is where we're putting a lot of effort. So much of what we do is very regionalized. It's very relational. It's a relationship with the store owner, between the store owner and their customer. And we're, how can we leverage a lot of the marketing technology platforms that we work with to take some of the burden off of the franchisee and really convey that personal message, that personal touch across even things like email and e-commerce site visits and things like that. So that's really where our immediate future focus is. And I think that will just then serve as a way to deliver on the expectations that people have after they've seen our ads and they click, and then continue that experience from there on.
Gotcha. Let's go to Shalini.
Okay, so my prediction is a keyword-less search arena. We are already making those shifts. Google has been introducing dynamic search ad campaigns where we're really not giving them a keyword list. We're just providing the landing page or the website, and then machine learning takes over and then tries to match the query to the ad to the landing page. So I feel like that's where we're headed more in a year from now.
Machine learning, I love it. That makes a lot of sense. And then Boyd.
Yeah, so mine's more specifically for franchise organizations, and I think the organization or the data organization is going to be a lot better a year from now for franchise brands. I think everyone is starting to understand how important the data is, and they're looking for solutions on ways to organize that data to tell the story, right? And I'm excited to see what that does for digital marketing, because there's a lot of ways that we can look at that return on investment if we're able to plug into a CRM that is across thousands of locations. And so I just think franchise brands are getting smarter about how they organize their data, and we'll be in a really good place next year.
I like it. That makes a lot of sense. So better leveraging the data, better leveraging machine learning, a lot of leveraging of technology just to get smarter, better, faster returns on our marketing programs. Not too many questions. If you have any questions, enter them into the chat. We'll start off with this one. What tools are out there to help manage these local media programs? Shalini, we'll start with you. What tools do you use? So
what tools are out there?
Yeah, just from a technology standpoint, what kind of tools do we use to help us make sense of all this? You know, if we're managing 300 locations and they all have different budgets and different, you know, how do we help our team manage these programs?
So Local Act would be my first tool that I use to leverage to see all the data. It brings in, you know, paid, it brings in social, it brings in analytics, it brings in whatever we need to analyze data. But I'm positive there are other marketing tools out there. I just use Local Act the most.
Sure. But then in terms of the actual management of the campaigns, we typically leverage the technologies of the platforms that we use. So the Facebook API, we use, it's not even called SA360 anymore, right? It's DV360, is that the official?
So SA360 is more search.
Okay.
And yes, SA360, and then of course the other actual platforms, if we don't go to the serving platform, is the Google Ads, Microsoft ad platform on its own as well.
Right. So all of the various media partners that are out there have technologies that they've developed to help use them, and then there's some intermediate ones that can kind of be a go-between between you and the and that advertising channel.
Mm-hmm.
Bo, I'm gonna kick this one off to you. How do you track offline in this attribution piece of the puzzle?
Yeah, a lot of times it's driven by, you know, a coupon or an offer for sure. You know, a direct offer, and we track at the local level how many of those coupon redemptions did we get. But
Right.
the other thing is just simply lift within a category or a particular product, sales
Mm-hmm.
lift. Did we, you know, how did we do this year compared to same period last year without an offer or a promotion or a, you know, awareness campaign around a particular thing? And really, we find that there are a lot of times where we don't have to have that offer. I would say, especially this past year, you know, we dialed that back a good bit because we just really didn't have to do it as much to drive interest. And you're able to see that, wow, we had you know, a post about hummingbird feeders, and hummingbird feeder sales go up. So
right.
you look for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Some other ways that you can do it. Just if it's a pure awareness campaign, you could look at your Google Analytics traffic, and if you have a lift of your direct or brand traffic after or during a big promotional push, that's one directional way to see it. You know, similarly to the coupons or promos, you could have a URL that is only shown in those awareness tactics. So it could be you know, just a slash promo or something along those lines. So there's a few different ways directionally that you can use it. There's also a lot of attribution vendors out there that you know, they tend to be on the expensive side, but they can aggregate all of that data and put together some reporting back for that. I have another question about creative. Creative is so instrumental to all of these programs, whether that's Facebook or a video or a connected TV. Though, how do you manage creative? Is that all? The question is specifically, do you do it all in-house, or does the various franchisees provide their own creative? How does that work?
Yeah, from a broad mix perspective, we do manage it in-house, provide everything from direct mail pieces, newspaper ads, you know, digital, all the channels. Provide that on a planning calendar that the franchisee has access to. They can then move that, you know, as you might imagine, hummingbirds, like we talked earlier, I've got hummingbirds in Indiana. You don't have them in Seattle quite yet, you know, so they can move those campaigns around. as needed. But from that perspective, we're able to identify each of the pieces that go into that campaign.
Yeah, and I think what we see typically with our various clients, the best solution I see is that there's definitely a big involvement in-house from the branding and the creative, but then there's a lot of creative partners out there that can develop geographically relevant creative at a low cost. And even some of the platforms like a Facebook or a YouTube can help you build that creative at a very low cost. So there's a lot of different options, but if it starts with that centralized branding and creative plan, and then can kind of spread out from there. Bo, this last one is going to be for you too, and I think that will be it. So the question is basically, since you guys were in kind of that category increased, what did you do? What did you shift as you saw an increase in demand to capture that?
Well, number one, thank goodness we had digital advertising in the mix before the pandemic started. I really would say that that allowed us to be super nimble as things unfolded. And we did see a big shift even within local markets, within a local franchisees mix, to shift away from some direct mail and put more towards digital, as I mentioned before. The big thing for us, of course, is like so many retail companies, curbside pickup, buy online, pick up in store was kind of the pre-pandemic model, take it out to the curb, during pandemic. But we did a lot of messaging around that just to make people aware of the fact that we offered that, and really ramped up as even during the times when stores were shut down, that you could buy online and have things delivered to your home. And then that was something that was a big message for us. And we're seeing that behavior stick even as things are getting back to our next normal. We're really seeing that people love it, and they're going to still come back in the stores. We know that, but they like to be able to shop online too when they want to. And that has been a big change for us.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, well, I think that just about does it for us. Huge thank you to our panelists. Here's an additional plug for Wild Birds Unlimited. If you don't have a feeder in your backyard, no time like the present. Tell them Bo sent you.
There you go.
But I think just to kind of summarize some of the talking points today: data. There's so much data available. Make sure you have your ducks in a row. You're tagging everything so that everything can be measured. Leverage technology whenever possible. There's a lot of different tools out there. And then on the local level, it really comes down to education. How do you explain this marketing mix to the franchisee in a way that makes sense, helps them understand it, helps them feel really empowered by what they're doing, and then just make sure that you have a sound strategy. Make sure that you're talking with smart people in the space and exploring new ideas and how they all fit together, and you'll be successful. I think that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for today. Location3, thank you so much for sponsoring and all of your support of IFA. And thank you all for attending. Again, this recording will be up online later today.
Great.
Have a great one.
Thanks, everybody.
Everybody.